Today I'm just going to go through a way to enter the data for a school. I prefer to use, most schools use spreadsheets. And the key thing is to understand the curriculum continuum that I explained on the home page, because the curriculum continuum describes the range of structures that schools can use, and it's important to understand those range of structures. I like to try and get most of this information on one sheet. A lot of the timetabling programs, you've got to navigate multiple sheets, and the data entry is quite complicated and time consuming, whereas I think if it was on one sheet in this form, it'd be much easier for schools. So the first thing is, I think you need a unique class code. So I've used the style where I have the subject or part of the subject name first, then I use 2 characters for the year level, and then I use the last character as the class, and I use suffixes of A's, B's and C's, although some schools use 1, 2s and 3s. The subject name, that might be necessary for certain reports. The subject code, this style of subject code where I've just taken the first 5 characters of the class code, I think is really useful for a lot of things which become apparent in a minute. The faculty might be useful, the year level of course, and you could have all year levels on the one sheet, or you could have year 7 on one sheet and then year 8 on another. The home group is really important, particularly in your lower year levels if you're using that home group style curriculum structure. Now this is the important bit of information here, is the structure. Now linking back to the curriculum continuum, you've sort of got 4 basic structures. You've got a home group structure where the class runs independently from other classes within that year level. So it's sort of like a class, and you've got plenty of flexibility. So that's a home group structure. So you might use a syntax in this column similar to HG or just H, or any sort of syntax that would make sense to you. The next sort of structure is when you're joining some classes together so that they run at the same time. So here I'm joining Maths 7A, Maths 7B, and if you scroll down, Maths 7C. So I've used the syntax, I've called that join A. The Phys Ed classes are a different join, I've called them join B. So they will run at the same time. And then you could continue on in year 11 and 12 where you have that more lined or block structure. You can use this syntax join next to each of the classes that need to run at the same time. There's the secondary home group, the smaller home group, or the rotation. So you could have a syntax for that secondary home group. And they're really the basic structures. So a lot of programs go to all sorts of, do all sorts of somersaults to get you to put that information in and understand it. I believe just a simple spreadsheet like this, and you've got the whole structure for that year level fairly well figured out. Next, most classes will need a room. In Australia, we don't tend to, well, the government schools don't tend to have a homeroom for each class. We have usually many less rooms than there are teachers. So rooms have to be shared, which makes it difficult for timetabling. So the strategy for timetabling is, if a class has to be in a room, like an art room, the kids have to be in that particular art room, then you lock those kids in that art room. If the kids don't have to be in any particular room, then this notion of a room set, that they could be in any one of a group of rooms. So I've said there's a group of rooms called the English room set, of which there might be 5 rooms. And then that gives the software the opportunity to, or flexibility to room those group of kids, because sometimes rooms can really lock your timetable down. So this notion of a room or a room set is really important. In a similar vein, a teacher or a teacher set. So I'm using teacher codes. So if a specific teacher needs to teach that subject, then you enter the specific teacher. But if you have a set of teachers that could teach that subject, then I'd opt for that option instead, because that gives you more flexibility. Next, we need to know how many periods and whether those periods are doubles, triples or quadruples, and perhaps you want to give the class a colour. When you see a master timetable, colours can often display certain things. So there's the year 7A, and the next thing I need to do is make sure all that adds up to represent the weekly curriculum that I've got. So I've got 30 periods a week, so that should add up to 30. The doubles are mostly for practical subjects where those 2 periods are one after the other. So that's a quality issue. Triples and quadruples are rarely used, but sometimes they can be. Now most programs have a staffing table where you've got a staff code. We tend to use codes here in Australia because they're easier, more efficient to print out on master timetables. The staff names, you usually need some indication of their maximum period allotment. So in Australia, for a 30 period week, it's usually about 23, 24. So you need some indication of what you can build staff loads up to. And then you need some way to, as you're building staff loads, that you keep track of to make sure that as you build, this number doesn't become bigger than that one. And then you can see if, for example, John is a couple of periods, I can allocate him another 2 periods. Next, I think you need a teacher set. So Paul Hogan can teach art year 7. I'd probably say art year 8. So he could be in a number of teacher sets. So a few programs are now using this teacher set to do automatic staffing to get a bit of a rough idea of whether your staff fit the curriculum. Rooms, we tend to use a room code. You could have a full name. Schools now have multiple campuses, so kids travel between the two. You need to know that. How many seats in each classroom, so you can allocate the appropriate number of students to that class. Maybe a full name. And this notion of a room set again. Usually the room set won't be as specific as the teacher set that I just explained. But using a room set to help automatic rooming is really good. And then lastly, a structure. So perhaps a Monday to Friday, although lots of schools are going to a 10-day timetable. How many periods in the day? Although that needs to be flexible. Some schools run different periods on different days. Where the breaks are. So typically in our schools, the break is recess is after period 2 and lunch is after period 4. Thank you.